learners and viewers, welcome to this session. Today's session we are going to look at the basics of modern economics. This is part of the course MGPE 006 Gandhi's Economic Thought. Welcome to this session. Let us start with how economics as a discipline emerged as over a period of time. We are going to trace the history of economics. Secondly, the philosophers and economists who have contributed for building the economics as a discipline. Like by tracing the history of economics, it is easy for us to connect how the Gandhi thought about the economics should be. What is Gandhi's thought on economics? Let us start with discussing the philosophers who have contributed to emerge economics as a single discipline. The fundamentals departure by the modern economics from the classical lies in showing that prices of goods and services depended not so much on the cost of production, but on the demand and supply of them at a given point in time. The foundation for this came from what Robbins calls the marginal revolution. It is due to this evolution that the modern economics was no longer a political economy, which still continues to be part of the economics. The political economy still, even learners from the political science and the economics, they do study the political economy. The economics became an independent scientific discipline. We shall briefly review the beginning of the modern economics in the same way as we have done in the case of classical economics. This will help in understanding the thought evolution and continuity from the predecessors. The evolution of economic thought will continue until Alfred Marshall, the first master of modern economics, after which the present state of modern economics will be presented. Then we will present an idea about what modern economics today. Hope our learners and viewers, you will understand what we are trying to learn from this session. That is the current modern economics, what we are talking about the current modern economics, how it has built over a period of time as a single discipline. The modern economics is also known as neoclassical economics. This name was given by an Austrian economist, Thorstein Veblen. The credit introducing the marginal revolution goes to three scholars, Jevons, Menger and Walras. Menger and Walras had independently discovered the application of the theory of value to the idea of declining marginal utility. Jevons too came up with the theory of political economy, but it is not explaining the economy or economic system. Instead, it focuses on the theory of value in relation to utility and the theory of capital. Both are the core elements of the modern economics. Utility was something which was not seen as an important in determining the price of the good. To put it differently, the classical economist focused only on supply side for explaining the price and the economy, whereas modern economics saw and introduced the demand side. Hope here our learners understood. Like for example, the modern economics, it saw both supply and demand side. Perhaps this is what led Alfred Marshall to say the famous maximum, which meant that even a parrot could learn economics, it should only learn two words, that is demand and supply. Utility appeared in theory of value for the first time in Jevons' writings in a major way. It got established that utility had its foundation in wants. Second, utility is not intrinsic in a commodity. Utility is attached to the commodity when an individual thinks about it. Thus, utility is related to thinking about a commodity for a particular purpose. Here, we could clearly understand about Jevons' writing in a major way. It got established itself that utility has its foundation it wants. It is an intrinsic commodity it attached to a commodity when individual thinks about it. Thus, utility is related to thinking about a commodity for a particular purpose. Secondly, Jivans also introduced the concept of market, which to him is a place and area where all buyers and sellers come together. An important thing he notes is the absence of conspiracy among buyers. Nobody is influencing the market. Everybody has complete knowledge of the price at which a commodity is traded or exchanged. Then the exchange takes place when the relative scales differ, that is, each buyer and seller for one another has a commodity which is relative high value. The goat with one person is more valuable to another who has a stock of poultry, which in turn is more valuable for a person with goat. In such a case, exchange takes place. A modern economics thus begins with Jivans, where he boldly takes a stand that the origin of value is in utility and the scarcity, thus dismissing the labor. Karl Munger developed the theory of value with utility independently apart from Jivans. He and his two students, Weiser and Born Bewirk, founded the Austrian school of utility theory. Menger differentiated between value and utility. Things which are not valuable may have a utility. Menger explained the utility theory in terms of an arithmetic table. It explained the way that exchange would take place. Interestingly, Menger brought out that utility of a commodity and its units also help immensely in case of income constraint. Menger in this sense also introduces the concept of maximizing total utility with income constraint. Walras, a French economist, developed a marginal theory independent of Jivans and Menger. His contribution was in explaining the complete static economic system. It is necessary to learn about Alfred Marshall in this context. He was a brilliant mathematician. He wrote Principles of Economics among many other books. He developed the theory of firm, in which included theory of value and theory of capital, working of the economy at macro level with money, credit and interest, and finally introduced the concept of equilibrium in commodity and factor markets at the economy level. None of this was complete, but Marshall's contribution in establishing economics as a science has been immense. Modern economics has immensely grown since the days of Marshall. Modern economics is presently defined as the study of how in a given society choices are made in the allocation of resources that have alternative uses to produce goods and services for consumption and the mechanism and principles that govern this process. I would like to explain further in this. I would like to repeat also. Our learners, you must understand that what we are seeing as a economics, that is modern economics, it is basically to study how in a given society the choices are made in the allocation of resources, whatever the available resources, how the choices are made in the allocation of resources that have an alternative uses to produce goods and services for consumption and the mechanisms and principles that govern this process. Thus, economics has become the study of efficiency in production and in consumption. So, modern economics also includes policy studies with respect to conflicting demands for resources and consequences of whatever choices are made, whether by individuals, enterprises or governments. I can tell you the simple example. For example, resources means even common property resources that is available in both urban and rural areas. With regard to rural areas, if you visit any villages, you could see that certain land or certain building, certain property is governed by the entire community. Usually generation after the generation it will be managed by the community. So, for example, this is the resources. So, to use these resources, what is the demand coming from the society, how efficiently the society could able to use these resources, what type of choices they are making to use these resources, whether it is a individual, government, enterprises or society. So, basically economics here, the economics has become the study of efficiency in production and consumption. Basically modern economics, it includes policy studies. Most of the time the policy studies, it supports the economics to efficiently allocate the resources for the purpose of production and consumption. Thus, modern economics is now a fully developed social science devoted to studying the production, distribution and consumption of wealth. The study of economics is divided into study of various branches. For example, microeconomics is the study of firm, industry, consumer behavior and markets. So, in a micro level, they study how the firm or industry, consumer behave and how the market operates in a very smaller scale. Even the behavior of the people in the particular society, in a particular area, how they behave with regard to economic activities. With regard to macroeconomic is the study of the economy as a whole. For example, to study the entire economy of the entire country, to study the economy of the particular state, or sometimes these days to study after this globalization and neoliberal economics, macroeconomics, they study how the economy operates at the larger level. The macro concerns were very well explained and theorized by the giant intellectual named John Maynard Keynes. He was a key theorist in economics. His theory has been developed into Keynesian school of thought. Keynesian economics is derived from his book The General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money in the year 1936, that explains the determinants of national income in the short run when prices are relatively flexible. That I would like to repeat again. The interest, according to the Keynesian economics derived from his book The General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money, that explains the determinants of national income in the short run when prices are relatively flexible. After Keynes, two branches developed, new Keynesian and post-Keynesian, and they later survived. The post-Keynesian theory is later survived. A future of post-Keynesian economics is the principles of effective demand, that demand matters in the long run as well as the short run, so that a competitive market economy has no natural or automatic tendency towards full employment. The positive contribution of post-Keynesian economics has extended beyond the theory of aggregate employment to theories of income distribution, growth, trade and development, in which demand plays a key role, whereas in neoclassical economics these are determined by the supply side alone. The role of state that was envisaged in the Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith has almost been regained after the collapse of the former USSR. The Keynesian school was confronted with the Chicago school, where Professor Milton Friedman argued cogently for market superiority in economic theory and policy. The Chicago school was the post-Second World War phenomena, which rose essentially against the dominance of state in the communist and socialist countries. The debates between the Chicago school and the Keynesian school continued to rage. Post-Second World War, the economic crisis world over saw the emergence of the mixed approach that the world governments took. The world witnessed the role of economists significantly hyped in the Bretton Woods conference, where two important global institutions were formed. One was the International Monetary Fund and the second was the International Bank of Reconstruction and Development, IBRD, popularly known as the World Bank. We end this section with a comment by the Partha Dasgupta, economist of international repute. He says that the modern economics treats human beings with respect. To quote, this it does by trying to illuminate the various pathways through which millions of decisions made by individuals, human beings, can give rise to emergent futures of communities and societies. Since individual decisions are in turn influenced by these emergent futures, example rate of inflation, productivity gains, level of national income, prices, cultural values and social norms, there is mutual feedback over time. This character of modern economics is not of course new, but it has never been espoused with such abandon as it is today. And so, when the modern economist says he seeks a micro foundation for some observation or other, and to unquote. The objective of this unit was to acquaint our learners with basic features of modern economics. This is necessary to understand Gandhi's economic thought better and also appreciate how the modern economics has developed as a discipline. We have done this by taking you through the journey beginning from the days of Greek philosophers and passing through the Middle Ages and entering into classical age and then modern or the neoclassical stages. This unit also acquainted the learner with the process in which economic thoughts were formulated and embedded into the then prevailing societies. We have also come to know about the prominent thinkers during each of these times and shown in brief the premises, arguments and theories they developed. We have ended this session by stating that the discipline of economics is not likely to have any laws that would be constant over time as in the case of laws in natural science, because laws formulated in economics are based on human behavior which has been ever changing. This also is the reason why there are constant criticism of economic thought and alternative thoughts keep emerging. In this light, we should be able to appreciate Gandhi's economic thought. I have taken the references from these books and the web sources. Hope our learners could be able to understand how the economics as a discipline emerged and how various thinkers have contributed to build economics as a discipline. Thank you so much.